Well, welcome back to continuing the discussion, Exodus chapter 25. When we studied Exodus 25 in the main deep dive, we looked closely at the instructions for the tabernacle and what they meant in the context of Israel's covenant relationship with God. In this continuing the discussion segment, I want to step outside that immediate context and look at some fascinating connections both historically and theologically that deepen our appreciation of what's actually happening here. We're going to explore how the tabernacle reflects cosmic symbolism, how it compares to other sacred spaces in the ancient world, what the materials themselves tell us about Israel's life, and how later Jewish and Christian thought interpreted these symbols. First, let's talk about cosmic symbolism. In the ancient world, temples were never just places of worship. They were conceived as models of the universe. In Mesopotamian thought, the temple was a miniature version of the cosmos, ordered according to divine design. The tabernacle fits the same pattern, but it's infused with Israel's unique theology. Its threefold structure, the courtyard, the holy place, and the most holy place, mirrors the perceived layers of reality: the earth, the heavens, and the highest heaven where God dwells. Now, the Ark of the Covenant, situated in the most holy place, is effectively God's throne room. In this way, the tabernacle was not only God's dwelling in Israel, but a representation of his reign over the entire universe. Now, one striking difference between Israel's tabernacle and pagan temples is the absence of an image of the deity. In Egypt or Babylon, the innermost chamber would house a carved idol representing the God's physical form. In Israel's theology, God is invisible and beyond representation. Instead, his presence is symbolized by the ark and the Shekinah glory above the mercy seat. This was a profound theological innovation. It declared that the Creator is not like the created, that he cannot be reduced to wood or stone, and that his true image is found in his people, made in his likeness. Let's also consider the placement of the tabernacle. Archaeological studies of nomadic and semi-nomadic tribal life in the late Bronze Age reveal that the most honored person's tent would be placed at the center of the encampment. Israel adopts this pattern, but with a twist. The honored person is Yahweh himself. This placement made God's presence visible and central in the physical organization of their lives. Every Israelite could look toward the middle of the camp and know that God dwelt there. It was a daily visual reminder that he was not far off. Now, about the materials. These are not just random luxury items. Each one tells us something about Israel's history and circumstances. Gold and silver likely came from Egypt, possibly as a part of the plundering described in Exodus 12, 35 through 36. Linen weaving was a highly skilled craft, and the blue, purple, and scarlet dyes were amongst the most expensive commodities in the ancient world. And interestingly, the use of kekheltet, blue, in the tabernacle became such a defining feature of Israel's identity that it was later commanded for the tassels on every Israelite's garment. Numbers 15:38. The symbolism of that blue is a reminder of God's commandments, traced directly back to the tabernacle colors. The cherubim atop the ark also deserves closer examination. In modern Western art, cherubim are often depicted as chubby baby angels. But in ancient Near East, they were composite creatures, part human, part animal, serving as guardians of sacred space. Assyrian art depicts winged creatures flanking thrones or gateways, symbolizing both the protection and majesty. By incorporating cherubim into the ark's design, the tabernacle visually linked Israel's God to the idea of ultimate kingship and cosmic authority, while simultaneously rejecting any notion that these beings themselves were divine. So let's shift to craftsmanship. Exodus 25 begins the long series of instructions that would require skilled artisans to carry out. Later chapters mention Bezalel and Oholab as chief craftsmen. But it's worth noting that their work required mastery of metallurgy, weaving, carpentry, and even perfumery. In the late Bronze Age, such artisanship was often tied to temple construction for kings. Here it is dedicated to God alone. This also reflects something about community identity. God equips his people with gifts, not just for survival, but for beauty and worship. From a sociological perspective, the building of the tabernacle was a unifying act for the entire nation. Everyone had something to give, whether rich materials or humble goat hair. This inclusive approach ensured that the tabernacle belonged to everybody, not just the elite. It functioned as a tangible expression of the covenant, God dwelling with all his people and all his people participating in his dwelling. When we compare the tabernacle to Solomon's temple, centuries later, we see both continuity and development. The temple was a permanent structure in Jerusalem, built of stone and overlaid with even greater quantities of gold. Yet in its basic layout followed the tabernacle's blueprint. This continuity reinforces that what God gave Moses on Sinai was not just a wilderness solution. It was a divine pattern meant to endure. In later Jewish thought, the tabernacle was often seen as a mirror of creation itself. Rabbinic literature draws parallels between the 7 days of creation and the stages of the tabernacle's construction. Just as God ordered the cosmos, so Israel was to order its worship space. This shows how deeply the tabernacle was woven into Israel's understanding of the world and their place in it. Now, from a Christian theological perspective, the tabernacle takes on an even deeper dimension. The Gospel of John deliberately echoes Exodus 25 when it says, quote, "The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us," John 1:14. The Greek literally says tabernacled among us. Jesus is presented as the living embodiment of God's presence, the ultimate fulfillment of what the tabernacle pointed toward. And just as the tabernacle was constructed from the willing offerings of the people, so Christ's ministry is built on the willing hearts of those who follow him. Now there's also a missional implication here. The tabernacle's location in the center of the camp meant that the presence of God radiated outward into the daily life of the people. For us, that's a powerful image of what it meant to live as God's people in the world. His presence at our center, shaping everything else. Finally, I want to bring this home with a personal reflection. As I think about the tabernacle, I'm struck by how God meets his people in the wilderness, not after they've arrived in the promised land. He chooses to dwell with them in their unfinished, transient state. That says something beautiful about his character. God doesn't wait for you to have your life perfectly in order before he draws near. He comes right into the middle of your journey with all its dust and imperfection and says, "I'm staying here with you." If you stayed with me through this whole discussion, thank you. I know this was rich and detailed, but I hope it gave you new ways to see the tabernacle as more than an ancient blueprint. I'd love to hear your insights, what stuck with you, what connection you saw, maybe even how you see God's presence in your own life's wilderness today. Drop your thoughts in the comments below so we can all learn together. And as always, I'm grateful we can walk this journey side by side. Thank you again for joining me for this deep dive in Exodus chapter 25, and we will see you in the next chapter tomorrow.